Have you ever wasted 10 minutes on a single round of combat because you and your players couldn't agree on a ruling that came up while you were playing a game of Dungeons and Dragons? Stick around for some simple tips on how to avoid those situations in your games. What's up, gamers? I'm Josh and this is Copper Dragon Games. On this channel, I provide tips and tricks to dungeon masters who are trying to improve their games. So if that's you, make sure you subscribe before you leave so you don't miss any updates. Today's topic is how to avoid rules arguments at the table. Some of you might already be thinking, the DM makes the rules. There should be no argument because the DM is always right. But the truth is, players don't always have the self-control to hold those arguments for later. Emotions are running high, what happened doesn't feel fair, and they understandably want to voice their concerns. Also, DMs are not perfect. We mess up. Sometimes the rules aren't clear, so we make up something on the spot, and maybe it isn't the most fair or the most realistic or whatever. Sometimes we flat out get rules wrong. I don't care how good you are at DMing, you will make mistakes. The best thing to do is prepare for them so those mistakes don't derail your sessions or compromise your friendships. Let's look at 5 ways you can prepare to avoid those annoying rules arguments at your table. First of all, it may sound simple and super obvious, but learn the rules. At least the common ones. I'm not saying memorize everything in the player's handbook and the Dungeon Master's Guide and all the supplemental materials that they've released elsewhere. Good luck trying, but at least take the time and effort to study them. And when you do anticipate that a rule you don't normally use is going to come up soon, look it up ahead of time so you're not flipping through the Dungeon Master's Guide in the middle of your session trying to find some obscure paragraph that wastes your time and the player's time. Keep a rulings document. Whenever you make a ruling that clarifies something that isn't clear in the books or that goes against something in the books altogether, make note of it so that you can be consistent. You might think you'll remember the next time that rule comes up, but truthfully, it may not come up for 5 sessions or more, and after that long of a time, you might be surprised at how foggy your brain can be. The point is to stay consistent so that your players know what to expect. And keeping a document where you record all of the places and times and reasons that you strayed from rules as written helps maintain that consistency. Designate a rules lawyer. Sometimes the best storyteller, world builder, narrator at your table is not the best at remembering all the minutiae of the rules. Especially for you newer DMs out there, it is totally okay for you to appoint a player as your designated rules lawyer. It's your job to keep the story moving and the game session on track. It's their job to help you stay on track with the rules and to look up something that you have forgotten or don't remember so that you can continue the narration and resolving other actions while they look up a question that may have popped up in the meantime. If and when you do create a social contract for your group, and I suggest that you do, address within that contract how you plan to handle rulings and rules disputes when they come up in the future. How you create a social contract could be a series of videos all on its own, and I still may revisit that topic at some point in the future as well. But the important thing is to share ahead of time how you plan to handle those things so that players aren't caught off guard. This last one may actually be the most important, and that is to have a plan ahead of time for how you will address those disagreements. Now, I'm not talking about the plan that you shared with your players during your social contract, assuming you use my previous tip on social contracts. What I mean here by having a plan is know what you're going to say. Practice how you will verbally respond to players who are questioning you in the moment about some rule that they disagree on or some rule that they're accusing you of having wrong. Your response can be as simple as, we talked about this ahead of time, we're going to keep moving and then we'll discuss after the game. Or it could be as complicated as saying, you know what, we're going to pause your turn and move ahead with the next person's turn. Before the following turn, go ahead and look it up, find the rule for me and show it to me. And if you can't prove me wrong in that span of time, then we're going to go with my ruling and we can still discuss it after the session. Whatever your plan is, practice it. So when that moment comes up, you're not feeling defensive. You already rehearsed how you're going to respond to that situation. These 5 tips do have a few things in common. You want to be as predictable as possible to your players, at least when it comes to the rules. Surprise them with the story, crazy plot twists, absolutely. But when it comes to the rules, maintain as much consistency as possible and maintain as much predictability as possible. The more your players know what to expect from you rules-wise, the easier it will be for them to handle it even when they don't agree with what just happened or how you just ruled on something. It's a lot easier to stomach something that we don't like when we're prepared for it ahead of time. And the second commonality is just being prepared. Disagreements happen. They're inevitable. You cannot spend hours and hours and hours with the same group of people every week or every other week or however often you play and never disagree on anything. It is literally impossible. So if you know that it is inevitable, prepare for that inevitability. Prepare for it to happen so that you can handle it appropriately and consistently when it comes up. Because it will. The more appropriately and consistently you do handle them when they come up, the more respect your players will have for the way you run your games, and the more likely they will be to come back and continue participating. So what do you do at your table to avoid rules arguments? Feel free to share your own tips in the comment section below, and don't forget to click that subscribe button before you go so you can join me next time when I share more tips and tricks on how to improve your game of Dungeons & Dragons. We'll see you then.